All right, everybody. Sorry about that. Has some display problems, as all of you got to see. Hello and welcome to my session. My name is Nick Mosley. This session is Augmenting Your Windows Management Strategy with Config Manager 2012 Task Sequences. And feel free, if you want to, because this is such a large room, the text might be a little bit small to read, so feel free to move on up if you like. And then please also hold your questions towards the end of the session. So like I said, my name is Nick Mosley, and I just want to fly past this real quick, but I'm a co-facilitator of a user group in Denver, Colorado, and along the Front Range. So if you happen to live in that area and you do not know about our user group, please go visit our website, or you can come talk to me after the session. And then also that URL that is listed is to my personal blog, which I have on anything related to technology that I am working through. And after probably sometime in the next couple of weeks, I will post code examples and demonstrations, the demonstrations that I'm doing today. We'll walk through those. So our objective today is that I am going to give an overview of task sequence fundamentals. And this, by using these task sequence fundamentals, we will be able to extend your systems management strategy to take your systems management strategy beyond what just regular packages and applications can provide in Config Manager 2012. And then also I'm going to provide solutions to everyday challenges. These are solutions that either I've experienced throughout my 9-year career or things I've experienced with other customers and things that I see on the Microsoft forums. And then I'll also go over some cool tricks with task sequences, which are mostly from the community, things that people in the community have put together to facilitate managing task sequences or managing systems with task sequences. And then, of course, I will have live demonstrations throughout. So the first thing I want to talk about is packages versus applications versus task sequences. As many of you may know, one of the challenges with what we call classic packages now in Config Manager is if you just take a package and you need to target a set of systems, usually you don't want to. Some people will take whatever software it is and deploy it to all of their Windows computers. And that's okay, right? It gets that software out there. But usually you only want to target the systems that don't have something. This is called using sub-select queries. And the challenge is that, so for every application that you're deploying, you have to build a unique collection and a unique query to uniquely target all of those systems. And so it just adds a lot of administrative overhead. The benefits of applications in Config Manager is that in 2012, now you get a lot of built-in logic for the deployment. So you can take, for example, Adobe Reader, grab that MSI code and deploy that to all your Windows desktops. And it will only install based upon the applicability rules. So Config Manager 2012 has come a long ways in simplifying systems management for the especially on the desktop side. However, there are still some gaps in Config Manager 2012, or there's still some gaps with applications and the classic packages that we can fill with using Config Manager task sequences. And so this is to kind of distinguish task sequences. Most people will understand that task sequences are primarily used for deploying operating systems. However, they can be used for so much more than that. And that is my primary goal today. Now, I'm going to give a quick couple of demos on the application model, just in case no one has seen it before. I mean, it is the end of the week, and again, I didn't say this earlier, it is the end of the week and the last one of the day, so thank you for coming, because I know that by the end of the week, I've been here enough years that your brain is just full, so thank you for coming. VM here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Adobe Flash as the example. I'm going to do one as just a plain old MSI that I'm going to import, but then I'm also going to have another one that is still Adobe Flash, but it uses a custom script to not only install Adobe Flash, but then also copy a configuration file, which many of you probably know. There's this MMS.cfg file, which you can use to turn off auto updates of Adobe Flash. So I'm going to give these two examples real quick. So in the applications node here, we'll just go create application. All right. I'm going to switch over here. Go to my source file location, my Flash directory, latest version of Adobe Flash. Just going to select that MSI file. Oh, sorry, this particular VM is not running on a solid state drive due to space limitations on my laptop. So yep, there we go. It's starting to import it. So it's automatically pre-populated this name field from what it grabbed from the MSI, pre-populated the silent install switches, so there's nothing that we need to put in there. Click Next. And in its most simplistic form, I have just created a deployment of Adobe Flash, which when targeted or deployed to a group of systems, will only install on those particular systems. Is there anyone who hasn't seen the new application model yet in 2012? Mr. Ross. So everyone has seen the new application model. That's good. So then I will just go through real quick and show you that other deployment. So on the deployment type here, go. There we go, create deployment type. This is going to be a script installer. I'm just going to call this Adobe Flash script. Content location is the same as what I had, and for the installation program, I'm going to select this batch file, which I'll just see if I can open that real quick. Which, like what I said, is it just installs Adobe Flash and then copies this MMS.cfg file into that directory to disable it. Click Next here. Now, on the clause, this is how we're going to build in our detection. On the previous one, it automatically imported the MSI GUID to know if that install is applicable. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say Windows Installer, because I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to select this MSI, and it's going to pull out that product code for applicability. I'm going to say Install for System, whether or not. Now, one of the other things that is good about the application model, and I'll show you this in a moment, but the one of the other good things about the application model, which we had to use task sequences a lot for in Config Manager 2007, was excuse me, no, it was not to do with task sequences. I'm sorry. But as far as the supersedence goes, so if with regular packages, if you have a newer version and you have a new version and an old version, that old version is deployed, and you send out a deployment of that new version, well, then they can start contending for each other because one version would uninstall, but because of the subselect queries, if not designed properly, then a computer could refall into that collection and try and install the old version. And so now with supersedence in applications, what we can do is we can just go to the properties of that guy, and I kind of blew by it in the wizard. Or excuse me, I'm on the wrong properties. If I go to the properties of this application, I can say that this application supersedes my old version of Adobe Flash 10. So now, if both of these are assigned to the same computer, only Adobe Flash 11 is going to be applicable and installed. Although I did not see where it went to. That is interesting. I got to assign. That's right. I forgot. I've got to assign it to a deployment type. There we go. And so now, if I look over at my client here, well, actually, you know what? I don't want to show that. Let's go. Let's just do that. So anyway, that is the new application model. All right, so the task sequence fundamentals. And so as I mentioned earlier, back in Config Manager 2007, we had to use task sequences a lot to do some workarounds for deploying applications robustly. For deploying programs robustly. And some of the things that, like for example, that we had to do is if an application or if a program install terminated with a custom exit code, call it 10, then that would be interpreted by the advertisement as a failure because it is not zero, because it was a non-zero exit code. So we could use task sequences to say what a custom exit code would be to define a custom exit code as successful. So we can go into the properties of the task sequence, run that program, and say success code is 0, 10, 3010, or whatever number you might need. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong slide here. So for the steps and groups, the things I'm going to focus on today, showing you, are kind of almost everything in this group of systems. I'm going to cover the run command line a lot. That's where we can, just run any kind of command line, whether it's using a file like cmd.exe that is on the local system, or it could be something within a package file. I'm also going to go through an install application step, which is being able to take the Adobe Flash that we just used, or that we just had, or that we just created, and use that in a task sequence. The install package is, again, using those classic packages. And install software updates. It can be used to coordinate the installation of software updates, so Microsoft security updates, as part of a task sequence. So, like for example, if you deploy Office 2013 to a group of systems and you want to immediately patch those as well, a task sequence is a great way to do this. So on the exit codes, this is the one I was just talking about. So if we had a custom, or if we had an application that required a different exit code to know its success, this is where we would define it, is on the, excuse me, get my mouse here, is in this section. And then also I'm going to go over the conditions. Conditions are used a lot, whether it's setting a custom task sequence variable or checking the operating system version. I've used file and folder properties occasionally, but I've used query WMI a lot, and that's where we can query the information on the local computer to determine whatever set of rules we need to know about in seeing if a particular install is going to be applicable, if it's going to meet those conditions. And then I'll just make a note about the system versus user context. Whenever you're building out a deployment of packages or applications, if you don't already know this, when you create that deployment type, it is critical that you set the option to install as system, because task sequences don't allow end user interaction. So you have to set that deployment type to install as system. And then when the task sequence runs, it does not allow it does not allow interaction by the end user. So we have to run it as system. So continuing on with the task sequence fundamentals, these are what I call the ABCs of task sequence variables. We have action variables, built-in variables, and custom and collection variables. For action variables specify configuration settings that are used by a single step in a task sequence. So for example, I've got the option here to disable 64-bit file system redirection. When this particular step executes in the task sequence, it is only applicable as an action variable. It is only applicable at the time that this step executes. And as soon as it moves on to the next step, then it is no longer applicable and that value is reset. Same with the timeout and the run this step as a following account. Those are also examples of action variables. So with built-in variables, built-in variables are, variables that are built into the task sequence. I really don't know how to explain that any further, but they are available for use clear throughout the task sequence. And I pulled out a few of them that, to me, are a little bit more important when it comes to managing systems with task sequences. The first one is SMS last action succeeded. So if you do a check on this task sequence variable, then it will tell you if the last step was successful or if it failed. For the SMS TS machine name, this one isn't quite as applicable. I haven't used it a lot, but the one thing that I'll note is if you're doing something to rename a computer as part of an OS deployment, this value will pick up the computer name of the active running system. So whatever the record is in the config manager site, that's what this value will come back as. So if you have to do some sort of check or do a rename, this is what you can grab. The SMS TS error dialog timeout. If there is an error in the task sequence, the default time at which that error dialog is displayed on the task sequence is 15 minutes. If you need to have that be longer or even shorter, I'm not sure if you can go shorter, but if you need to have it be longer, then you can change this task sequence variable to be something like 60 minutes or 2 hours. The SMS TS persist content, one of the things that is different in Config Manager 2012 from 2007 is there's just no longer a run from server option as part of a deployment. And so the content will download every single time that it executes. So if you need to run a package over and over as different steps, you can set this variable and it will stay within and that package will stay within the client cache. And for the SMS TS post action, I will have a demo on this later on, but it will, when it's defined, it will run a particular action at completion of the task sequence. So with custom and collection variables, When it comes to managing task sequences or managing systems with task sequences, you might end up using custom variables a lot. At least I know that I do. And so you can define any variable with any name, with any value, and use it however you need to throughout the task sequence. And then for collection variables, I will have another demo on this later on as well. But with collection variables, you can assign a collection variable to a specific group of systems that can help you manipulate and manage those systems in different ways, but still only allow one step. So you could have two different collections with two different sets of collection variables, and then when those systems run the same task sequence, they might perform different operations based upon how you've defined and set up these collection variables. All right, so now I'm going to do some demos. The first one is I'm just going to show you a little bit of some steps and groups, and then I'm going to show you conditions and exit codes, and then finally I will show you variables. So going over here I'm going to edit demo 3. And one thing I'll say is the way I'm running this demo is I got everything going, all the information going into a log file just for easy display. So at the start of every demo, I'm going to input a line that will show where this started. With the run command line, this is just demonstrating the run command line step where I'm using a command prompt to just echo, this is a run command line, into that log file. And then for the run command line package, this is just a demonstration of how we can use a package to call, or with this specific executable in it. And for the install MSI files, I'm going to run through a couple of different ways that we can install an MSI file or install an MSI-based application install. Although with the exit code 10, that one is not actually a MSI install, but what it's meant to show is how I'll switch over here and show you that, but essentially it's just a batch script that will terminate with exit 10, so that's a non-success exit code, but it will be successful and will log that information. And then this one is pretty standard. I'm just going to do it anyway, but it's a standard package running an MSI install. And finally, I will log that this group has completed successfully. So now if I come over to my software center, and this guy, so there you can see that it popped up with this is a run command line. It ran our demo executable installer, and now it is currently detecting the applicability of this batch file that I have for the exit code 10. There we can see that just completed successfully. And now we're installing our second program, which is what I call MSI number 1. Install MSI number 2, and we just completed. So let me go verify that my MSI files did indeed install. Here we go. And there they are. MMS 2013 demo number 1 and demo number 2. So now coming over to demo number 4, where we talk about the conditions and the exit codes. Now, this is where I'm going to show how, or at least on this group, this is my demonstration of, I'm sorry, I got different groups. But on here, what I'm doing is I'm saying, I'm doing a check for if demo MSI number 3, because as you saw, I only deployed MSI number 1 and MSI number 2. If MSI number 3 does not exist, let me click into this guy, you can see it. So all I did was import that MSI, and it added the product code and the upgrade code, and if it matches, then it's true, and that means it's installed. But what I want to say is if it's not installed, then go ahead and execute this entire group of tasks. Now, one of the ones that I did not have on my slide earlier was this connect to network folder. There might be times where you don't have a package or an application, but you still need to run an installer. It might be some developer's PowerShell script out on a remote server, or that's a good example, actually. And so what we can do is we can do this connect to network folder to that path, assign it a drive letter, specify the credentials which can be used to connect to that folder, and then what I'll do is we'll run that MSI file from that location. So for the restart computer, there might be times where you want to suppress, So best practice is whenever you're deploying an application with a task sequence, you need to be able to suppress any restarts of that application for the native system. But rather, allow the task sequence to perform that restart, because it will give a nice GUI or a nice reboot reboot prompt to the end user. So if there happens to be a user logged into Windows at the time that it's running, then they can select, close all their applications and select restart now. But what I'm going to do on this guy is, because I don't actually want to restart my system, again, I'm doing a check. I'm doing this WMI query where the computer system model is like virtual machine manager. Or virtual machine. I don't actually want to do the restart if this is a virtual machine. So I'm saying if none of those conditions is true. So this computer will not restart as part of this. And then I'll log that it completed. And I'm going to do a couple more tests of the exit codes. This one is going to do we'll demonstrate how exit code 101 by running this step. You can see I've defined exit code 101 as being a success. And then over here, this one will actually be a failure, except I got to remove that. So my batch file is going to exit with code 101, but the task sequence will fail because I have not defined it here. But you know what? I'm going to leave the continue on error there. But it will fail. It'll look successful, but it will fail. So let's run that guy. All right, so there we can see that it completed the install group. Let me open up that so I can show it to you again. So that message of the completed install group, there we go. So all that means is that it did successfully run these conditions. It did not find that MSI number 3 was installed. For demo number 5 here on the variables, this one is using I'm going to use a collection variable, which I should come over here and show that to you real quick. Where are my device collections? Properties. Oh, no, not deploying it to this guy. Thought I was. Here we go. Demo collection variable. I've set this up as do install. So when we're running the task sequence, if that condition exists. So if this task sequence variable, demo collection variable equals do install, then we will run this entire group. And then for the PowerShell execution, I'm going to demo that. Now, there's one thing that I learned today. As I was running through all of my demos to make sure everything was okay and running all right, I was having problems with my PowerShell script execution. So as I was troubleshooting it, I went out to the web and found someone else's solution for how they run PowerShell scripts in a task sequence. And foolishly, I just did a blind copy and paste of the PowerShell code, and I ended up with what's called a smart quote. So it's not really a quote, and I spent an hour trying to figure out why this simple PowerShell command kept failing. So lesson be learned. If you are looking at any examples out on the web, make sure you take that code and copy and paste it into Notepad before you try to use it in your task sequence, or anywhere else for that matter. You might end up with some smart quotes. But essentially all we're going to do here as part of this PowerShell execution is I'm going to set set the execution policy to be unrestricted, so that will allow for it to be installed. Then I'm going to do a copy of the script to the local system. I'm going to run that PowerShell script, delete the PowerShell script, and finally set the system back to run or to be restricted, to have restricted execution of PowerShell scripts. Now this is kind of a long way to go about doing this, and I don't recommend it per se, but I wanted to demonstrate all the actions that you can do, or various actions that you can do with PowerShell. Now if I come over here. Run that. So we can see that it did pick up from that, or this computer picked up from the collection variable do install, so it did run that group of systems. I may have breezed by, sorry, while that's running. Or I'll just come back over here. So there it shows the execution of the PowerShell script was successful. I realized I breezed by one thing that was important, and that was that was running the setting a custom variable. So right here, I set this custom task sequence variable, so it's not the collection variable, but I just set it to this value, and then I use a VB script to grab that task sequence variable and write it into that log file. And so by doing that, we ended up with this right here is the Nix MMS 2013 custom variable. All right, so now I'm going to have a series of questions on which tool you guys think is best. I've kind of rambled on here a bit, but you guys, you tell me what you think. I'm going to give a situation, and you tell me if you think it's best addressed with a package, an application, or a task sequence. Now, the one thing that I'll say is, this is what I believe to be the best solution in each scenario. Yes, there are times when you can use both a package and an application, or a package and a task sequence, or all three for that matter. All right, so targeting users to install a specific software installation. Would you guys use a package, an application, or a task sequence? Who says package? How about an application? And a task sequence? I got one man in the back. Answer is application. So yes, sorry, not to pick on you or anything. So applications combined with user device affinity provide administrators with a user-centric approach to software delivery. So you could take, so you could have like a group of users assigned to Visio through an Active Directory group, and you can assign it to those users for automatic installation. All right, so coordinating the deployment of Microsoft security updates alongside another software install. Package. Application. task sequence. Yahtzee! So I think I did mention that earlier as giving Microsoft Office as the example, where you could deploy Microsoft Office 2013 as an upgrade and then do an install software update step to coordinate the immediate installation of additional Microsoft security updates that are approved after that. So content that is modified on a regular frequency. Package. Application. Task sequence. I went too far. The answer is package. So if, again, I was using that example of a developer. Let's say they have a network share where they upload and change files on whatever basis that they determine of whatever they're doing. So the easiest thing to do is to use a classic package that is targeting those source file locations, and then you can set the package to automatically update the content on whatever basis you want, be it daily, be it weekly, monthly, whatever it is, for redeployment to systems, so long as that deployment is then running on a recurring schedule. So package is the best in that situation. All right, so prompting for information to use during an installation. How many say package? How many say application? Anyone say task sequence? I think I got most everyone on this one. So in my opinion, when it comes to prompting for information of an end user, a package and a program is the best way to go, because a program is config manager 2007. So that deployment type can be used to allow end user interaction. And if you remember from what I said earlier, task sequences themselves do not allow end user interaction. There is a workaround that we can do to get user input, and I will cover that later on as a demonstration. But if you're doing something just a simple task where you got to prompt an end user for some value, then I would personally do that through a package. All right, formatting the disk of a computer in a remote location. Package. Application. How about a task sequence? Very good. So this was actually a situation that I had been faced with at one point in time. A bunch of remote locations were being sold off, and the assets were being sold along with them. But we can't give them company data, all the software, the version of Windows. We can't allow them to have that. So what I had done was I set up a task sequence to restart Windows, boot into Windows PE, and then do a double format of the disk in order to ensure that it was completely wiped of all company data. All right, so execution of recurring tasks. Would you do it with a package, an application, or a task sequence? I only saw one hand, but it is a package. So package deployments can be scheduled to run on a recurring frequency against a collection. Let's see. All right, so chaining a series of actions to perform an installation. Chaining a series of actions to perform an installation. Package. Application. Or a task sequence. It is indeed a task sequence. Now, you can do this with packages by chaining those deployment types together. Applications were really not meant for doing anything on a recurring basis, or for chaining a series of actions together. You can do that with the dependencies in a way, but a task sequence is the best way to go about this. Upgrading a software product with a newer version. Package. Application. Task sequence. Very good. It is indeed an application. So as I did with the Adobe Reader using the supersedence rules, upgrading one software to another is a lot more simplified and easy to do with an application. All right, custom countdown time for a post-install restart. Package, application, task sequence. Very good, very good, guys. Yes, it is a task sequence. So I will be sure to show this to you because I don't think I did. But with that task sequence, we can define a custom restart countdown time. All right, last question. Distribution of Silverlight to all computers. Would you use a package, an application, or a task sequence? None of the above. All right, so this was a trick question. Silverlight is deployed as part of the config manager client because it is what it has the software update center to function. So we don't need to distribute Silverlight. That was a trick question. Did anyone get less than 5 correct? Mr. Ross? 5 or more correct. Did anyone get them all correct, including the trick question? I saw a couple of hands. Good job. Well, that might mean you looked at my slides in advance. Thank you very much. All right, so now I'm going to get into some real-world scenarios. I mentioned earlier about standardized computer updates. Or actually, I did not mention that earlier. But one of the things that I had done, again, throughout my career was, so imagine that you've got a lot of laptops and they're frequently traveling or they're gone, and you need to deploy a bunch of applications to a group of systems on a regular basis, so every month or every other month. One of the challenges with laptops is, like I said, they might be gone, they're offline overnight, users take them home, and if they come in the next day and there was a deployment that was enforced the previous night, then it could run on them at that point in time as soon as they come in and could force a restart. And we were having this problem within our organization, and I had to come up with a solution that was a little bit better. So what I decided to do is, for the desktops, I deployed the software as is, program X on Monday, program Y on Tuesday, etc. But for the laptops, I put all of those same applications into a task sequence and then just deployed that task sequence to the laptops. Then it became the responsibility of the end user to go into, at that point in time, run advertised programs and select that advertisement to run at their leisure. So they could do it, an hour before going home, or right before leaving for the weekend, coming in first thing in the morning. So that's kind of how I set that up. So with demo number 7, I'm going to show a multi-process Java upgrade. This was a real example recently from the Microsoft forums that I thought would be a good one to show today. Now, granted, the one that I'm going to show you is a little bit embellished, so I'm doing a lot more things than necessarily that particular person needed to do, but it still is the essence of the problem that they were in that they needed to fix, in which just using the regular application model to deploy a newer version of Java was not going to be sufficient. And for demo number 8, I'm going to go ahead and show you that installations, or task sequence installations, which require end user input, and how we can work around to make that happen. Oops. Come back over to my machine. So on the standard computer updates, again, on this particular group, we're going to say that it is only going to execute if the system is Windows 8 64-bit, which indeed this VM which I'm running is Windows 8 64-bit. And for the install application, actually there's not much to this. We're just going to install 7-zip. And then also, at that point in time, I'm going to coordinate the installation of software updates. That's the one thing that I didn't mention when I was describing that situation earlier, where I would put in all the updates or all the applications to be installed for laptops into a task sequence. That also included Microsoft security updates and whatever was being deployed to those systems at that point in time. And the way that this works best is do not set a mandatory software, or do not set this item right here, the mandatory software updates. Set it as all software updates. And then in your deployment to those groups of systems, in particular the laptops, set that to be a non-mandatory deployment. So we don't want a situation to arise where the user might run this task sequence, but the software updates do not get installed. All right, so now if we run this guy, all right, so here it goes. It is running all of those Windows 8 updates that were in the group and set to only run on, Windows 8 64-bit. So if you're in a transition period where you're managing multiple systems, but the updates are different, so you still have Windows XP systems that get a group of, or Windows XP laptops that get a group of updates, and Windows 7 laptops that get a group of updates, and Windows 8 laptops that get a group of updates that are all different from each other, you can put that into a group like that, and then they will only be targeted and install for that particular operating system. Now, it kind of flew by, but as I was talking, but we did install Qt PDF as well as 7-zip. And now it's installing the software updates. So this is just an example. Yeah, we can see it installing right here. I just did a quick one with a definition update for Office 2013. But this is just how you can coordinate the deployment of your monthly updates or bi-monthly updates or whatever frequency that may be for your business. And give a little bit of convenience to the end user. Now for the multi-step Java, that's the next one here. So this was a kind of an interesting situation. Again, it came from the Microsoft forums where a corrupted version of Java had been deployed out into the environment, and they needed a method for essentially ripping out that old version of Java and in order to be able to install and properly configure this new version of Java. So like I said, this example is a little bit embellished, but I'm going to show it anyhow because I think it's a good case point. So the first thing that we're going to do is this corrupted install was missing a bunch of files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of these missing Java files into the location where they need to be. Then what I'm doing here is I'm going to do a check to make sure that missing file, that critical missing file, is present on the system. If it's not present on the system, then I'm going to exit the task sequence with I'm going to exit the task sequence with a personal exit code of 100. So that way, as I'm troubleshooting situations on failed deployments, I can say, okay, well, I know that this computer failed at this point in time. It did not have those files. And so if I come over here and I look at this, we're going to just pretend that java.ini in the Windows temp file is that critical file. If that critical file is not there, then I can't continue the rest of my steps. So therefore, I need to exit. At that point in time, we're going to run the uninstall of Java. And again, in this particular situation, once those files were copied, according to this person on the forums, once those files were copied into the program files directory for Java, then it would still allow the uninstall cleanly of Java. But then what we're going to do I'm going to do here is I'm going to report on the failure. Oh, I don't have it there. I'm going to report if that Java uninstall failed. So there were still situations where even if I ran uninstall.exe for that particular application, it might have critical leftover files or critical leftover registry keys. And so what I'm going to do is check that this folder, Java MMS, exists. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I missed one here. This is where I'm using, I missed that. That step should have actually been up here. But what I'm going to do is we're going to use that SMS TS last action succeeded variable. And if it equals false, that means the last step did fail, then we're going to terminate with exit code 101. And in order for this to be successful, to successfully report the failure, we actually have to come up here to the options and select continue on error. So if for whatever reason this returned a non-zero or non-3010 exit code, then the task sequence would continue so that I could report this custom failure. But on this report folder, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to check and see if this application, after it has been uninstalled, left the folder in the program files, then we want to generate a different failure, so exit 103. Oh, I'm sorry, exit code 102. And then over here on a registry key, I'm going to do a check, and if the Java underscore MMS, if that registry key exists, then we want to report error code 103. And again, this is all kind of for troubleshooting thing. It's a little bit embellished, but it could be helpful for a complex deployment like this. And then finally, we're going to install Java. And if the install of that new version of Java fails, again, checking that this SMS TS last action succeeded equals false. If this was not successful, then we want to report error 104. And then finally, we will complete the task sequence. So now let me come over and we'll run this guy. All right, so there, yeah, and it's going to go too fast for me to really talk through, but as you can see, all of those errors that I built in, they were all successful, as I intended them to be, but they are there for a reason. If we come over here and look, yeah, so we successfully copied the program files, uninstalled that corrupt version of Java, reported that Java was fully uninstalled, continuing on. We installed the correct version of Java, and finally, this is where I just logged that the whole process was completed. So now, I'm going to use that same Java fix example, except we're going to say that after Java, what we're going to pretend is that after Java is installed, we need to do a restart of the system. But we don't want to just force a restart at that point in time. We want to give the end user the option to restart or not. So what I've done is I've created a custom little VB script prompt to display to the end user if it's going to be okay to restart the computer now or later. And to do this, there's a workaround that was part of the, I'm sorry, it's not a workaround as part of the MDT toolkit, but it's a utility that's included in MDT 2010 and newer called Service UI. And that is something that will allow a task or an end user interaction with a task sequence. Because as I've said before a couple of times, users can't do anything. All they get is that progress bar that shows what's going on. They can't select any options or anything in that fashion. So what we'll use is this Service UI. Excuse my mouse over here. We use Service UI to, the best way that I found that this works is I copy all of the files to the local system for execution. And then this prompt for restart, this is where I run the service UI.exe with session 1, so that's the current logged in user session. I'm going to run MS HTA, which is to display that custom HTA file, and then the one that is that HTA. And then I'll log some status messages as to what the user really selected. And so if they selected yes, or I'm sorry, so I forgot to say, what that HTA does is it sets a custom task sequence variable on the back end as part of a VB script. And so I can then use that task sequence variable, that custom task sequence variable, as part of this particular step. So if OSD restart now, which is what I'm setting in the HTA, so if OSD restart now equals yes, then we're going to restart. If it equals no, then we won't. All right, so now, so it's running through all of those same Java steps as it did before. But now I am prompting for the restart, and I've got all these windows open. Let me close them. There we go. And there's my little HTA prompt that is, as you can see here, is being done as part of the task sequence, where I can select restart now or restart later. I'm going to say restart later. I'm not really in the mood for restarting my demo environment. So successfully requested restart to end user. All right, continuing on with the real-world scenarios. Running an action after the task sequence completion. This task sequence variable, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is new to Service Pack 1 for Config Manager 2012. It is not available in the RTM version, nor is it available in Config Manager 2007. Then for Demo 10, I am going to show you what that task sequence looks like that I was describing earlier, where I needed to remotely format all the computers at a location because those locations had been sold. And I'm going to show you some protections that I built in as well, so that way if that task sequence were to accidentally get deployed to all systems in a particular state or location that it wasn't supposed to be, that way you don't end up in almost a disaster recovery type situation. So I'm going to show you some of the protections that I built in for that. And then also, one other thing that's good for, and this is Demo 11, so one of the other things that's really good for using task sequences to do is if you need to make changes to BIOS, but you also use BitLocker, if you make a change to BIOS and then you restart the system, then you're going to trigger that BitLocker security, and it's going to need to be unlocked. And so what we can do as part of a task sequence is suspend BitLocker, make the changes, restart, and then re-enable BitLocker. Oops, wrong key. All right, so for the post-task sequence actions, this one, I left this step disabled because really one way that it's a practical example, and I don't want to do it as part of this, but a practical example of when to use the SMSTS post-action is if you need to uninstall the config manager client. So let's say you needed to run a bunch of actions as part of a task sequence, but then at the immediate completion of that task sequence, you needed to uninstall the client. So the problem is that you can't uninstall the config manager client, which is driving the task sequence, if the task sequence is actively running. So a real practical example, again, of this action is when you need to uninstall the client at the completion of the task sequence. But I don't want to do that now. So what we're going to do instead is I am going to So in setting this variable, I'm going to echo into the log file that we should not see this entry first. So this particular action comes before this one, which is this run command line, which we should see this entry first. And then I'm just going to do a quick pause of the task sequence so that we can see that the first entry was logged but not the second. If I come over here, so there we go. So there's the very first entry that we should see first. Right now the task sequence is just sleeping for 10 seconds for dramatic effect. And there, now the action which we should have not seen first, that we should have seen second, just ran at the completion of the task sequence. So again, that last step in the task sequence was to sleep for 10 seconds, and there was absolutely nothing after that. For the remote disk format, again, this is one that if you're ever in a situation that you need to do this, be very careful. You don't want some config manager newbie to accidentally take that task sequence, thinking it's your Windows 7 upgrade task sequence, and deploy that with a mandatory deployment to all systems. And I've heard horror stories of that happening. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set this collection, this group, to only run if do format drive exists. So this is the idea here is that we're going to set a collection variable with this particular custom variable of do format drive. And if a computer ends up in that collection, then it will receive this and it will be okay to run these set of instructions or these set of steps in the task sequence. So example one for doing this is what we're going to do is we're going to restart the computer, and I put in a length of 1800 seconds, which is, I think it's like an hour. So if this should happen to accidentally run on a group of systems, we're going to give them an hour's notification. So that way, if we have to hit that big red button to stop everything, then we'll be able to get an advance notice of that. So it's going to restart into Windows PE, and then we're going to run a format and partition disk, and in this case, I'm just doing a quick format of it. And then we're going to run what I call the double wipe special. So this is as close to a DoD type of wipe that you can get for a hard disk drive, is by running format C:, with and I should have looked this up before, I don't remember, but the /x and the /p, or the /x is to confirm, but the /p gives 2 passes of a full format. Okay, I remember. /x will randomly write zeros and ones. That's what it does. I'm sorry, can you repeat? Aha, okay. Very good. I thought I might forget that, so I left myself a note, and I didn't even see it. Good catch, sir. Thank you. So in the second option, the other way that you can add a little bit of security to this, so instead of running a command, this double wipe special, so instead of running that as part of the task sequence, what we can do is we can do a connect to network folder, which was the example that I showed earlier, to run this batch file. So if for some reason, again, this got accidentally deployed to systems that were unattended, and they're seeing that restart message, that restart warning message, then what we can do to quickly stop this or prevent it from occurring is just go to this location where the batch file lives and delete it, rename it. And that would be another way to quickly prevent this from executing. And then finally, after the formats are complete, we're just going to restart Windows. It's restarting Windows PE, and then when it comes back up online, it's not going to find a valid partition on the disk, and will therefore just be a dead machine. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm not doing a restart, I'm doing a shutdown there. But you get the same idea, because if anyone went and then powered it on, that partition would not exist, and so it would not have anything to boot into. So I will go ahead and run this, but the thing is that because I am not in a collection with that variable, it will actually do absolutely nothing. Or it should if I've set this up right. Yeah, and see, it just ran by so quickly. If I come over here and I look at... Oh, did I not? Maybe I wasn't logging on that. But it ran so quickly that it did absolutely nothing. This example for suspending BitLocker, I'm not actually able to deploy this to my system because it's running on a VM. Well, you can't run BitLocker on a VM because there's no TPM chip. But what we're going to do is we're going to run this manage BDE command to disable, actually disable means suspend, so we're going to suspend BitLocker for the system drive. And then we're going to run an update of BIOS, install some additional security updates, restart the computer, and then finally, when that comes back up, we're going to resume that protection. So unfortunately, I am not able to run that. So these are some tips and tricks from the community. If there is a situation where you are using task sequence to manage your systems, but you don't want that dialog box, you can simply use this portion of a VB script you run this little snippet of VB code right here, and it will cause the dialog box to be hidden. But within that same VB script, if you then execute whatever installation you have going on or whatever else may be occurring. So take for example earlier where I had it come up with that custom HTA prompt to restart now or restart later. Let's say you just want it to show that HTA box and you don't want it to show that window. This would be a prime time to take this little snippet of VB script and put that inside of the HTA to then hide that dialog as part of the execution. Sir? Yes, correct. Thank you. Good question. Yeah, that will only work as part of the execution of that step. So as soon as it goes on to the next step, it will bring that back up. Yes, thank you. Good question. So Service UI from the MDT toolkit. Again, I did a demonstration on this earlier, but the one thing that I'll say is there have been newer versions with each revision of MDT, and I have found personally that the one in MDT 2010, not update 1, so just in MDT 2010. I don't know if the code has changed. I believe it has, but that one has been most successful to me in the times when I've needed to use it. So for detecting installed software with WMI queries, you know what? Let me pull up my lab on this one because I want to show this to you guys. I'll just use this as an example. So if we need to detect a particular software install, let me just add something here. We'll take our Adobe 11 that I added. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry, that's a bad example because if I use an application, it's already going to detect if it's applicable or not, determine if it's going to run. So let's do that. We're going to say it's that MSI install that I have. But there's a couple ways that we can go about detecting if this software is already installed and whether or not we want to run the step in the task sequence. So what we can do is we can use this installed software and go to the MSI, which I believe I have right there, and it will look for that product code. Actually, what I need to do here is I got to add another step first. So if this software, this installed software, does not exist, then it becomes applicable. As I mentioned, or as I was starting to talk about, is if we come over here and we add an application, there's nothing that we need to do for the detection, because since this is an application and it's got its built-in detection logic already as part of the clauses, there's nothing else that you need to add. And then the third one that I was going to show here was hotfix detection. So we'll just pretend real quick that this is a hotfix that we're deploying through a package. What we can do is we can do a query WMI for, let me copy this. We go select star from that class where I think it's name, like KB 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if it is like that, oh, that's probably going to fail because, his name. So this is if you are deploying a hotfix through a package, the way that you can detect if it's applicable as part of the installation in a task sequence is to use this Win32 quick fix engineering. That's where all hotfixes get stored, if they've been installed or not. All right, some more tips and tricks from the community. There's only a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and breeze through these. This is one that I showed earlier. It's something that I like to use. If you just need to pause or sleep in a task sequence, then I just ping localhost, which is that local computer, with the number of attempts that we want to do. So in my 30 attempts, 30 seconds, 60 attempts, 60 seconds is kind of my basic guideline for however long I need to sleep in a task sequence. A good time when this might be applicable is if there's an install that maybe spawns off another install, but the primary executable terminates early, then you still need to allow for this other application to keep going and keep installing. So a quick workaround could just be to use this, this sleep method, this quote-unquote sleep method. So if you need to check for a particular process, if it's running before execution of that step, so again, let's pretend that you're doing an install upgrade of Visio, and you want to make sure that Visio is not actively running at the time that you do that install. Well, you can, again, using that WMI query to check for Win32 process on that app name. And if that app exists or it's actively running, then you can use something like kill.exe or whatever, or maybe do a restart of the computer in order to clean that up so you can proceed with your installation. And then performing a bulk compliance evaluation. So with the old DCM, now just called compliance, if you have a bunch of those compliances, those baselines deployed to a group of systems, they're all on their own schedule. So if you needed to do something to get them to run all at once at that point in time, you can use a PowerShell script to invoke the trigger evaluation from that WMI class. Now, I did not post that script up on here, so I will put that up on my blog, and it's actually courtesy of Trevor Sullivan, I believe, is who wrote that script. Couple other tips for success. Set a maximum runtime on your installation. of your packages and applications, because if there is a problem, you don't want to wait for 240 minutes for it to fail over. You want to wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Actually, I think 15 minutes is the minimum that you can do now, but you don't want to wait forever. So set that minimum. Limit the deployment of that task sequence to the target operating systems. So like I said, if you're deploying to laptops, have it be only to the operating system that your laptops are running. Don't let it accidentally get deployed to servers and run. Just kind of be in the habit of setting your deployments to run whether or not a user is logged on, because task sequence cannot allow end-user interaction. And then allow this app to install without being advertised. That is also useful for steps where you're not, for times when you don't have that specific step in the task sequence. Keep in mind the run as 32-bit process on a 64-bit system. Sometimes you might need to do that in order to get an application to install correctly, or actually just to install. And one other note is that a task sequence is for the application step. I missed that. So for the application step, task sequences are limited to 9 apps per step. So you might need to have multiple steps to do a slew of applications. All right, so in summary, if you have a complex situation or you need to deploy multiple software or accomplish upgrades that are not easy to do with classic packages or applications, then really take a look at utilizing Config Manager task sequences to accomplish your goals. The one thing I'll say is, so again, here is my blog. I'm going to, in the next couple of weeks, post the code examples. I'm going to do some task sequence walkthroughs on my blog, and then if you just want to, instead of going back to my blog over and over again, if you want, you can just sign up to receive updates and through RSS or through email. And then also my blog is also syndicated through my IT forum, so if you have that through a RSS feed, then you will receive that information through there as well. Yes. Sir. I'm sorry, I could not. Can you walk over to a microphone? I'm sorry, I could not quite hear you. And if anyone else has questions, please go up to a microphone. That would be helpful.
Was the limitation of 9 apps per step also true with SCCM 2007?
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat the question?
Was the 9 applications?
Oh, was it? Oh, the 9 for applications. Well, the application model is only in Config Manager 2012. It does not exist in Config Manager 2007. So yes, that is. So not applicable. Go back 2 slides. Yes. This one? Well, I will hang up here if there are any more. Oh, ma'am. Yes, question.
I've actually used your task sequence to deploy the Oracle client, instant client. My issue is, how do I get it to rerun on machines where it failed? I mean, automatically rerun. It only runs once, and if it fails, it goes away. I mean, it doesn't run again.
Yes, correct. So you would need to set up the deployment to run on a recurring basis.
Well, it is.
Oh, but I see what you mean, because then it's, yeah.
I want it to force rerun if it didn't succeed.
So in the deployment, if I'm not mistaken, let me come over here and look. Let's take a look real quick. Oh. You know what? That is a really good question. I'm going to take note of that, and I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up next week and post it on my blog. But I know what you're asking. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Just one, I was thinking on that one, is there any way within a task sequence to reposition where you are in that task sequence? If this go further up?
You know, that's funny. I was actually trying to figure out if that was possible. I thought, what better way to show some of the dynamics of how dynamic a task sequence can be if this happens, go to something previous. And unfortunately, I was not able to find a way to do that. But yes, I like your thinking, and I was trying to do the same thing. I might even continue to go down that route a little bit further, because I would like to know myself. All right, well, thank you, everyone.